you can be slogging through your private lessons. Maybe you're really enjoying it, and that's giving you enough motivation to keep playing and stay excited about music. But I think the thing for me that keeps people motivated is actually having the experience of playing with other people. So I think, yeah, whether it's putting yourself in a chamber group or creating a little jam session, or going to a jam session that already exists, um, putting yourself in the experience of actually making music with other people is what is going to keep you motivated to continue playing, because there's nothing better than that. And all the practicing in the world, doesn't really serve for anything until you actually put that into practice and show that what all the technique stuff that you're working on is actually going towards the greater goal of making music. And you can do that solo, but it's way more fun to do it with other people.
Welcome to String Sessions, the Music Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Joanna Farrar, and it is my pleasure to introduce our very first guest here, the international folk cello star Natalie Haas. As you'll hear in the episode, Natalie and I are both graduates of Juilliard, and Natalie has toured the world as a recording, performing, and teaching artist within the folk music world for close to 2 decades now. She and Scottish fiddler Alistair Fraser have toured the world as a duo, and she has been a guest artist on over 100 albums. She is one of the most sought-after touring cellists in the world right now, and in this first conversation on the show, we talked about the ways that fiddle camps helped to shape the musician she's become, how they differ from classical music camps, and some of her thoughts on motivating and helping young artists develop. This is our inaugural episode, so if you enjoy it, I really hope you'll take the time to subscribe, share it with friends, and leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. We have a lot of exciting things planned for the show, including practice challenges, Q&As with artists, and much more. So stay tuned and check out our website at musicparentpodcast.com. Enjoy the show. So thank you so much for joining us. And Natalie, thank you so much for being one of our first guests on this podcast. It is really lovely to have you here and to be able to talk to you about all this.
Yay, thank you so much for having me.
So I have, kind of introduced a little bit of your fantastic background and how, diverse your musical career is. But can you just tell us a little bit in your own words about, what your career as a professional cellist looks like, what all the pieces are that are in play for you in your work?
Yeah, well, I, as took a very not traditional path in straying a little bit from the classical music world after leaving conservatory. And so I have been playing folk music all my life, pretty much for as long as I have been playing classical music. And that's kind of where I ended up finding my niche. So my working life looks like mostly touring, which is how I make the bulk of my income, touring with Scottish fiddler Alistair Fraser, and we've been touring as a duo for the last 23 years or something like that. And so that's really kind of my main project. We've put out like 6 or 7 albums now, and we spend most of the year on the road, touring across the globe, mostly in the States, but some stuff in Europe and Australia as well. And so that's the main project. And then I also am kind of a freelance artist. So I will, when I'm not on the road with Alistair, I will kind of do work for hire stuff with kind of one-off things that people ask me to be part of, you almost all fiddle related, and then there's a fair bit of my work that consists of teaching, and I do a lot of teaching at fiddle camps in the summertime, which kind of take over my summers, and then kind of large scale workshops. I did a lot of online teaching during the pandemic, but I actually don't do that much in-person one-on-one teaching. I do have a few online students that way, but I'm kind of living in a place where I don't have access to a lot of students right now. So I'm doing all of my one-on-one teaching online. But then yeah, I still do these fiddle camps. I do multiple ones every summer, and kind of there's a few that are spread out through the rest of the year as well. And then I do a fair share of recording stuff as well, most of which I'm able to do from home. Just kind of, I have a very simple studio setup for doing overdubs on people's albums. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a mix between touring, playing concerts, and then recording and teaching.
Yes, absolutely. And the teaching is within many different environments and around the world as well. So you have a very broad background of ages and, sort of places that you are doing that teaching, which we'll get into a little bit. But you mentioned leaving conservatory, and I mentioned in the introduction that obviously you are a Juilliard graduate, as am I, and I know very well that you're a Juilliard graduate, as you were my roommate. So we both know about our Juilliard careers, but for other people, so you started cello at what age? And kind of, you mentioned how you did come from a classical background. Obviously, you went to Juilliard, you graduated from Juilliard, so you have that classical background as well. Kind of what was your experience of learning cello when you were younger? Just kind of, briefly.
Yeah, well, I started when I was 9, so kind of on the late side for today. My sister, younger sister, started violin a year before I started cello, and we were both Suzuki kids, and did that up until the end of the Suzuki books. And then I got a teacher who was not Suzuki based, and then, I knew I wanted to pursue music. I think the reason I decided I wanted to go into music was not because I thought I would have a classical career, but because shortly after starting Suzuki, like a couple years in, I discovered the world of fiddle camps, and that sort of vastly changed my life and my musical direction. So I was doing both, from the age of 11, all the way up to the end of conservatory, when I kind of stopped doing the classical thing as much. Yeah, going to fiddle camps during the summer, and then, playing classical music and chamber music and being in youth orchestras kind of through the year. So I led kind of a double life. And then, yeah, I knew I wanted to go into music, but there weren't a lot of opportunities to study the kind of music I was interested in, which was folk music, in a university setting. Hence why I decided to go to conservatory, because I knew I had a lot further to take my technique and repertoire and in the classical realm. So I thought, I got into Juilliard. I probably should go. And I did apply to Berklee College of Music, and they do have a non-classical program for strings, and they're one of the few that does. But it was much more jazz rock based, and I wasn't really as interested in those.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of because you were saying you have that unique perspective of the leading of a double life, which I think nowadays I think both of us are very happy to say is less of a big deal, and more people are doing it, and it's less of a thing. But I know certainly when I was growing up, there was much more of a stigma against that within the classical world, that I think now we've all seen that starting to change a lot.
Mm.
But in terms of for maybe for parents or for kids who haven't been to a fiddle camp, what would you, because I've been, and I love what Alistair's created and other people have created with wonderful fiddle camps out there. What do you think some of the advantages are, and why you continue to teach? You were a student, as you mentioned, as a young person at fiddle camps, and now you teach at those. What are some things that you find unique about that, or that you think are some of the strengths of that system?
Yeah, well, each one is slightly different, so it's hard to generalize them. But I will say that, yeah, I went to my fair share of classical camps as a kid too, so I really got a good view of how they were different. And fiddle camp is, well, like I said, it depends on the camp, because I'm involved in 4 Alistair camps. He's has kind of a lot of them throughout the whole world, and his philosophy is to have all ages present, and there are no auditions, all levels as well. So it's kind of like um, a system where the more advanced players help the not so advanced players, and you have adults and children learning in the same context. And it's also a different style of learning, not only because of the learning by ear, but also because it's very sort of mentor based. Like you're you are able to form close relationships with actually your heroes and teachers, because you're all eating together, you're living in the same space for a week, and having this shared experience. So there's not the same kind of hierarchy that there is in the classical world. I know myself and my sister both benefited incredibly from those kind of very close mentor relationships. Myself with Alistair, who really, helped me not only with the learning process, but then also like gave me a gig to like now we tour the world together. And same with Brittany, she had Daryl Anger and Bruce Molsky, who were both her mentors and gave her all sorts of gig opportunities, as well as teaching her and just being very involved in her whole musical life, and caring a lot about her musical future. Not to say that that doesn't happen in the classical world, but I think there's less of this sort of just I'm not sure what the way to say that is, but um, that it maybe there is some hero worship kind of going on too, but they're also, you see them as humans. They don't have this godlike quality, because you're in this shared living experience together in the camp, in nature, summer for a week.
Mhm.
And it's a very intense experience, because you're going to classes and stuff during the days, but at night there's all this jamming that happens up until the wee hours of the night, and you're sharing philosophy and very intense conversations as well. And that's what happens, I think, when you bring people from different walks of life and different ages together. And so it's a really unique experience. And for me, it was very motivating, going to these camps, because I found other people my own age who had the same interests as I did. And so
Mhm. Yeah.
I made some of my lifelong friends there. So I think it can really be great for a kid, to discover sort of an outlet like that, where you meet people that have the same interests as you, and that are your own age doing it, and maybe you're not at the same level of playing, but you find ways to make music together. Um, so
Yeah.
it's pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk a lot more about just specifically kind of diving into that, but for the moment, I think that you mentioned, of course, being able to connect with mentors like Alistair and other people. In terms of cello teachers and cello mentors, I mean, one thing for people who may not be familiar with the folk music world, you are rather unique in what you do, and I've mentioned that. And I'm sure when people look you up, for those who don't already know the awesomeness of your playing, when they do, they will see how unique you are. But because of that, it does mean that there is a smaller niche for now. I think I'm assuming, although you are the one to answer me on this, I assume that the cello niche has grown in terms of what you do and other people doing similar yet different things.
Yeah.
Were there other cellists or other instrumentalists that you were looking up to that kind of you were able to model after, or were you did you see yourself already as just kind of out there and very different at that time? Because I mean, I can imagine that would be hard as a young person, as a teenager, to be like, I'm playing an instrument that other people are not playing this way. What
Mm.
what was that experience like, you know?
Yeah, I don't know that I can remember that well, but I do remember that most of my mentors were fiddle players, because there
Mhm,
weren't that many other cellists doing it. I had one cello mentor who I had a couple of lessons with, Rashad Eggleston, who's kind of,
mhm,
just a couple of years older than me, really. Um, but there weren't that many people doing the things I wanted to be doing on the cello at that moment in time. This is like the mid 90s when I started going to fiddle camps. Um, there were other cellists playing it, but not ones that really excited me musically that much. But when I saw Rashad and Daryl also, who's primarily a fiddle player, but plays all sorts of instruments. And I saw him playing something that was cello-like next to me in a fiddle class, and also like had never seen anyone play like that before, and was so inspired. So yeah, I didn't have that close a relationship with Rashad, but was definitely hugely inspired by him. And yeah, I think I just kind of went along with the flow, really. Like, I don't think I questioned it that much. I just, yeah, there weren't cellists doing the kinds of things that Rashad was doing in Celtic music specifically. So I sort of had to, um, you know, do some groundbreaking there, but I didn't see it that way at the time. I just, I was just playing with my friends and having fun and
Yeah.
figuring out what you could do on the cello in that style. And and that's
Yeah.
sort of
That's awesome. Hmm.
how I got where I am now.
So when you are teaching, then, because we've talked a lot about how sort of the camps give that sort of close mentorship, are there things that you feel in your own private teaching that you've been influenced by? Because clearly your technique, you were mentored by fiddle players, but in terms of technique, then you had private cello teachers, and then of course you studied at Juilliard. Are there elements of what your cello teachers or your violin fiddle mentors gave to you that are some of the more important things that you try to pass on to your students, or things of that nature? What is your
Yeah,
favorite thing essentially to try to pass on to students is kind of what I'm asking.
well, it's interesting. You should ask. I feel like as a teacher, I did have wonderful teachers and mentors, but mentors are sometimes more mentors than teachers, actually. And I feel like that was the case in terms of Alistair. He's like incredibly knowledgeable, but actually is better at motivating people and causing them to question everything about themselves, and helping them to find their own voice, as he says, rather than like giving you the nitty gritty of actually how to do it on your instrument. It's kind of like a self discovery, and to get there, the student has to be motivated, and I was, but that's not always the case. So I feel like my job in a fiddle camp is different from my job as a private teacher, because in a fiddle camp, it's only 1 week of every year, and you're going to see your friends and have a good time, but you're also going to learn. And but actually, what you're really there for is to get motivated to continue playing, throughout the rest of the year. That maybe you're not getting exactly what you want in your classical lessons, but you come to fiddle camp and then you have this amazing experience, and you want to keep that energy throughout the rest of the year. Yeah, you want to load people up with excitement about making music, with other people, and I think that that's one of the big things that fiddle camp does, because actually, as a learning environment, it's large group classes, and maybe that's not the best thing for everyone. So and some camps are different than others. Like Alistair's camps are very kind of, as I said, like about getting motivated, but also about learning repertoire and style, specifically to Scottish music. And there's other cultures represented too. But then you go to like the Mike Block camp, for example. His camp is different because it's a little bit, more influenced by the classical music world. We have master classes there, but actually, what it's really about is playing and learning how to play in bands. And so you get some repertoire, and style stuff from the different teachers that are there, but you also form a band with people that are at a similar level to you, and you actually have an experience of what it's like to create your own music, in a very, professional kind of way, and be getting coached by all the teachers. So yeah, so there are different camps, different philosophies out there. And depending on what you want, you could be at a different fiddle camp every single week of the summer, and multiple ones during every week of the summer. So you really just have to decide what it is you want out of a camp experience, and stylistically what excites you, and that's how I would choose personally. But in terms of like getting better, I think it's definitely better to have a private teacher for that, or and it doesn't have to be somebody you see regularly. If you know, like I said, if you're a very self-motivated learner and you know what it is you want to work on in your own playing, you can seek out a person who can give that to you and get one lesson from them and get loaded up on stuff that you can work on your own for months after that.
Mhm.
Having a week to week teacher is a different thing, and that's why I don't do that as much, I think, because I don't know that I'm qualified to really help some, at that level of, I do have this one guy who I've been seeing for like the last 10 weeks or so. And, people who come to me generally come to me not because they want to get better at their instruments. They come to me because I have something unique stylistically to offer, and they want to know how to do
Mhm.
it better. And
Yeah, and I think
hope,
that that's, as you're saying, some of that has to do with self-reflection and knowing a what you or your child is in need of at that time. You know what I mean? Like if you know that either you have another teacher that can, fill in that technique gap, and that constant technique learning process. Because I know both you and I are constantly working on our technique. There's no point when you're like, oh, look, I am technically perfect now. But if that's something where you already have that in place, but then there's something that you need from the outside for another purpose, it's not one size fits all of one teacher for everything, and it shouldn't be. And I think that is something that is an important point of there are so many pieces of this puzzle. Going to a fiddle camp, one camp versus another, even though they can be both excellent, can give very different experiences to a student of a different age, of a different style, and different goals. Just like differing teachers can be either the right or not the right fit, or you might need multiple in order to fit those blocks together and really have a holistic learning experience for you or your child or whoever it is that you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
that's really interesting perspective. And by the way, I'm just going to say right now, don't listen to anything that this woman says about her not being proficient at leading people in week to week lessons. That's not true. She is most definitely. So, yeah, that is being included in the interview because no, you're not allowed to say anything else.
Okay, okay.
Because I know that. So you were saying how you are bringing something stylistically, which is obviously extremely unique, and something your technical proficiencies are unique in that way that you share with students, whether it's one off in a camp or one off a few lessons or week to week with someone. Um, when people come to you, what are some common misconceptions do you think about what people are looking for that you do, or common misconceptions that people think about what you do or how they can learn it? Are there things that you're like, I see we have this problem again, I will go to my toolkit to help them fix that?
Yeah, well, I would say
I know there's a
actually,
lot, but
yeah, learning by ear is one that people think
mm,
they can get like that. And
mm.
I'm sorry, but it does not work that way.
If
Yeah, it can be incredibly frustrating in the beginning for somebody who's coming to that. I have to say, having done Suzuki, that was a huge help.
yes,
But
yeah, definitely.
if you have not developed your ear in that way, then it's a huge leap to overcome, and it takes time, and can be very frustrating, especially if you're proficient on your instrument and you're not able to play back a phrase that somebody else plays to you. I mean, it's a very humbling experience at first, and takes time and lots of repetition to get faster at it. And so I think a lot of people who are coming to that in a new way can get frustrated in the beginning. Um, Other common misconceptions, I think, yeah, people um, often will come to me for learning tunes, and that's one part of what I do is playing melodies, folk melodies on the cello. And I will really start to harp on people's bowing choices because that's a huge part of the style, and people, you know hear a fiddle tune for the first time and they think, oh, that's cute. I can play that. And they play the notes and they play the right rhythms. And it doesn't sound anything like what it's supposed to because you're not doing the bowing, because that is like 80% of of what makes the style sound like it should. So yeah, I think just, some people bring some misconceptions to folk music in that it's easy or that it's yeah, so it doesn't
Mhm.
require a lot of technique. But actually, to play fiddle tunes on the cello, it requires a huge amount of technique.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So also that I have, you know, students from both camps. I have people coming to me from the classical world who have never learned by ear before, and don't really appreciate the nuances of the style yet because they haven't really gone in deep. And then I also have people from the folk music world thinking that they should be able to play this stuff, but actually, if they don't know how to go into third position, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
uh, yeah, so it's a little bit of a
Juggling
balance.
both of those. So kind of, I am curious. So let's say that there's someone who either they or their kid is like, oh my God, I've always loved Irish music or Scottish music or Hungarian music or whatever it is. Um, what is, if they haven't learned by ear before, or they just haven't played folk music before, what are some homework assignments, or what are some of the first steps outside of getting a good teacher, which is obviously a big part of it. You need to have someone to help guide that learning process first and foremost. But what else? What do you think is key for someone to kind of dip their toe in?
Yeah, it does help to have a teacher to point you in the right direction and make sure you're doing everything right. But honestly, I don't think you actually need a teacher on a week-to-week basis. I think you need to do your listening homework, number one. Because if you want
Yes.
to really immerse yourself in a style, you need to do some serious listening. And having a teacher who can tell you what to listen to maybe is good. But if you're passionate about it, maybe you're already doing the listening. So then the next step from immersing yourself ear-wise is to actually then put fingers to instrument and try and copy what it is you're hearing. And it's easier to do that these days that we have such amazing resources through the internet at our disposal of all sorts of online teaching schools, but also YouTube videos that you can slow down and amazing slow downers, an amazing program, best $50 you will ever spend in your life. And try and actually copy all of the little nuances, stylistic nuances, and trying to figure out how to get that into your fingers, both
Mhm.
right and left hand. So yeah, a lot of it is listening and copying, and then checking in with the teacher from now and then, just to make sure you're on the right track, I think is a good idea.
I will just add to that I did that exact same thing. This does not just apply to folk music. For parents and for students out there, I did that when I was a young person with chamber music, when I would be given massive chamber music assignments of quartets that I had to learn, and I had to do it really quickly. And so I would listen to the recordings. We didn't have slow downers at that time. When I was your age. And so I would have to go through and just literally I would listen to a 4-bar phrase over and over and over and over and over again to get what I thought their bowing was and what fingering, to actually pull out where I thought they were on the instrument and be able to imitate that. So it is something that applies just as much to classical. If you're trying, when you're at a certain stage in your learning, when you have a teacher or you already have the technique to be able to do that, sometimes then you just need to do that listening. So that's clearly that is the same between folk and classical, is the key to that.
Good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. If you were, because I mean, sometimes I think probably there are parents listening to this who are saying, "Wow, Natalie is amazing, and she was so self-motivated, and look at how amazing that is." How do you think your parent, like in your kind of experience as being a young person, how did your parents kind of help facilitate that? Are there things that you think they did right that helped you find that passion, that sort of encouraged you to be able to find a place that made you excited about this, or what do you think are some of the things they did that helped, or things you
Yeah.
think other parents could do more of?
I mean, I was very lucky. Like my mom didn't work, so she was 100% behind my sister and I, musically speaking. She came to all our lessons. She took notes. She held the camera, video camera, which my second after the Suzuki lessons, the non-Suzuki teacher required somebody to be there. Eventually, my mom got replaced by a tripod. But for many years, it was her physically holding the camera, taking the notes. But
Mhm,
in the beginning stages, she would just make sure that we practiced, that we touched our instruments for 15 minutes a day, minimum.
mhm,
But that it happened every day. And I'm sure there was some backlash there, but definitely thanked her, thank her for it now.
mhm,
Um, Not only, actually taking us to lessons, but also concerts, chamber music practices, youth symphony, like just incredibly supportive and wanting us to be, and fiddle camps. I mean, she came to the camps with us, not playing any instrument, to make sure we went to bed at night so that we would be up for classes in the morning. But actually, I ended up missing out on a lot of what actually is the good stuff about fiddle camp, which happens after class. But anyway, no, both, yeah, my dad incredibly supportive financially and also just being there at all of our concerts, with a smile on. And they weren't stage parents, but my mom is very motivated, and was really kind of in a quandary when I was trying to decide whether or not to go to music school, and she just reached out to all of the professional musicians she knew, mostly through the camps, just to ask them what their thoughts on colleges were, and was always, in my corner. And so I couldn't thank her and my dad enough for being that supportive.
mhm,
I'm sure that in the beginning, I can't remember this honestly because I was pretty young, but as a Suzuki parent, that parents are very involved. So I'm sure my mom was there making sure I was doing everything 3 times until I got it perfectly and blah, 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 and all that. Um, uh, yeah, I don't know that there's anything she did that wrong that I can remember.
I think,
I
yeah,
think,
and I think what you're emphasizing is that, like, that being involved, just being there and being that support for what
yeah.
you then discovered you loved about it, while also kind of saying at least 15 minutes, even on the days you didn't feel like doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that is wonderful. What, you have an incredibly busy life, which I know is your friend. We both have, we have to schedule our friend phone calls as well because of all the craziness of the musical world and the lives that we lead. But what are what motivates you? It's kind of two questions, so you can answer both or either.
Mhm.
Uh, what motivates you most about your career as a professional musician? That's kind of question one. And then question two is what motivates you the most? What do you enjoy most about teaching?
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Motivation in my career. I mean, I am pretty damn lucky, I have to say, to get to travel the world doing what I do and giving concerts and, seeing the joy on people's faces, during and after. Um, and that's another thing that I love about folk music is just how much joy there is in it, and it's definitely a shared feeling in the room, when you're giving a concert, or not even in a concert setting, like in a jam, and you have, there's a shared experience between the musicians, but also between the musicians and everybody else who's there in the room with you. Some kind of very special energy transfer going on that is very cool to be a part of. Motivating, I mean, yeah, that feeling of a shared experience, through music is a big motivator. Getting to travel and see the world and meet people, and meet other musicians actually from other cultures and kind of share a little bit of what they do and a little bit of what you do, and making music together and collaborating, and having something unexpected grow out of that is pretty amazing. And also making new music, because that's a big part of what I'm doing now is composing and arranging, and um, yeah, the joy of kind of having your own music be the thing that speaks through you is pretty special, rather than you just being a conduit for somebody else's music. Um, yeah. Uh, so, and then the other question, what do I enjoy most about teaching?
Mhm.
Um, I find it very, I mean, it depends on the situation, but in most cases, I find it energizing. And, kind of sharing your passion with somebody else who is also passionate about it, and getting nerdy on the stuff that only we as musicians could really care about, and sharing that with somebody else is pretty special. And yeah, I mean, I teach actually mostly adults, and um, so but it's the same, I think, whereas, they're probably, it's maybe not their first time having that experience, but I'm sure that's very special doing it with kids. But um, what I like is, yeah, just having having these shared moments, making, because actually a lot of the kind of teaching I do is, rather than me playing something and you playing it back, although online teaching, that's all it is. But when you're in the same room, whether it's a group or it's just two of you face to face, making music together is the ultimate goal, actually. And so whatever you've been working on the lesson, um, kind of actually putting it together, and seeing sort of all the wheels turning, and them actually putting into practice what it is you've been talking about. And it's different for every person. Like, that's what I love about the kind of music I play, is that you get to really see each student's and player's creativity coming out. I'm feeding them ideas, but general topics, but the ideas, the musical ideas are coming from them, and with each person it's a little different. So I love to, share my knowledge and then see where they go with it, because it's
Yeah,
going to be different for each person, and yeah, seeing them get to express themselves is
it's a
very
beautiful
joyful.
thing.
Yeah.
That is really lovely. Is there any piece of advice? I always like to end with, is there any advice or like, I don't want to call it words of wisdom, that makes it seem very intimidating indeed. But is there any advice that you'd want to leave students or their parents with, as something that you think is important to keep in mind or to do more of, as you're kind of continuing this musical journey?
Yes. Well, one thing that I learned at Fiddle Camp is that you can be slogging through your private lessons. Maybe you're really enjoying it, and that's giving you enough motivation to keep playing and stay excited about music. But I think the thing for me that keeps people motivated is actually having the experience of playing with other people. So I think, yeah, whether it's putting yourself in a chamber group, or creating a little jam session, or going to a jam session that already exists, um, putting yourself in the experience of actually making music with other people is what is going to keep you motivated to continue playing, because there's nothing better than that. And all the practicing in the world, um, doesn't really serve for anything until you actually put that into practice, and show that what all the technique stuff that you're working on is actually going towards the greater goal of making music. And you can do that solo, but it's way more fun to do it with other people.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely could not agree more. I think that is so, so beautiful and very, very beautifully spoken. So thank you for saying that. And Natalie, I want to let you go just for this first interview. I'm sure that we will have you on again to talk about this. There's so many other things that we could explore in terms of what you do, and how you help students and adults and everybody in between, all of us in the musical world. So I thank you for your time, and I will, yeah, be exciting to talk to you next time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to explore the rest of this podcast.
That was a fantastic first conversation, and I really appreciated what Natalie had to say about the importance of playing with others. Music is something that we certainly do need to learn and study alone at times. And we also have the help of teachers and recordings, YouTube videos, all the amazing technologies that make music learning so accessible and wonderful these days. But in the end, music is meant to be played with one another and for one another. As a member of the New Jersey Symphony and a chamber musician as well as a folk musician, there's really nothing like sitting down with my colleagues and getting to play Mozart or Mahler for people. And when I was a kid, the memories that are really the most vivid for me from my time at the Perlman Music Camp are the ones where I was playing chamber music rehearsals and concerts with my mentors and friends, and how motivated I was to prepare for those experiences. If you're a parent looking for ways to help your child look forward to their lessons or to playing an instrument, or if you're a young player or an adult who's looking for a bit more motivation yourself, I would really encourage you to look for ways that music can be played with others in a chamber group, a chamber orchestra, or just a way to sit down and play music with others near you. I've included some links in the show notes because there are really so many organizations and camps of all different lengths and types that happen during the summer, that happen during the year. There are a lot of people out there playing music that you can get together with, no matter what your age or your skill level. And I really think that it is the key to our musical educations and our enjoyment. If you have questions for any of these things, or if you just want to reach out to me and talk about the show or music, you can find me most easily on Instagram. I am at Joanna Farrar 802. I live in Vermont, so if you're wondering, our area code is 802. And let me know if you have questions for future guests or thoughts on the show or anything else. And you can also check out our website at musicparentpodcast.com. So www.musicparentpodcast.com. Or my personal website, joannafarrar.com. For now, enjoy your time with music, and I will see you next time.